Those Days with the Monsters, Part 18. In a dining area, with his mouth full of fluffy baked tuber to distract him from the lingering sting of too strong burning stuff, Kirrel started to think. He had understood the words Carpenter said, but Sleepy's vicious response still baffled him. He'd been taken aback by Carpenter's offer, but it wasn't an uncommon one for a rollaway to hear. It was generally considered one of a rollaway's methods of redeeming themselves, of being of value to the clutch, and often purchased rollaways lived longer anyway. He had had the option to be purchased before, but he had abandoned his clutch before they could agree on it. He'd wanted a pack, not a consolation prize.
"Sleepy?"
he asked softly after swallowing the tuber. "Yes, spaceman?"
"Why was that cumin Carpenter angry with you?"
Well, you could say we have a history. He was engaged to a friend of mine, you see, but he couldn't keep his hands to himself and, well, I told her, of course, and he blames me for losing what he calls the love of his life. I mean, if he was cheating on her, clearly he didn't love her that much, right? Sleepy took another swig from his flask. Anyway, now he blames me. Don't know what he's got against the captain, but there's some kind of history there too. Probably involves him being a jerk and not knowing how to take responsibility for his actions. Most stories about him do.
Oh.
Kirrel took a moment to digest that information.
And what did you mean about robbing graves?
Sleepy made a quiet amusement noise and stabbed an eating utensil into a slab of some sort of large herbivore meat in front of him. I meant I took it from a kill. Technically not grave robbing, but still. I put him in a grave, and then I took it, so maybe it counts. Made sure to get mine from when I killed myself, so I'm sure it's my trophy, not anyone else's.
How could you tell?
Kirrel's frills carried a blend of alarmed red and curious fuchsia. Mine were cleaner than most. I mean, Hooks and Captain's were pretty clean too, but they were on the sides. I was in the middle, so it wasn't hard telling. Sleepy sounded proud of himself.
So you're good at fighting? I know Alex is.
Sleepy nodded, taking a bite of meat. After a contemplative minute, he spoke, his mouth still full. "Yeah, I'm pretty good." Kirrel blinked and quietly asked him to repeat it. "Oops." Sleepy swallowed and sighed. "Sorry about that. I keep forgetting you use a translator. Yeah, I'm pretty good. Never went in the MMA circuit. I'm not great at that stuff, but I know my way around a fight pretty well. Most of us do, but you could say I'm a professional." For a moment, Kirrel considered this. Professional fighting, but not in a competition like Alex's. His eyes widened.
"You have wars?"
Immediately his frills flushed purple as he realized how silly the question was. These were Cumans. Their planet was a killer. Their people were fighters. Of course they had wars. Now that he thought about it, they might be better at it than anyone. Not for a while at least. About 10 years ago with the last big one, my side lost. Sleepy took a big gulp from his flask. Probably for the best. My side wasn't exactly the good guys. Of course the other guys weren't entirely the good guys either, but I guess it worked out pretty well, all things considered. Kirrel's entire neck turned fuchsia with curiosity.
"Who are you fighting for?"
Bunch of idiots down at the Bureau decided to find the Centauri colony as penalty for a riot. Riot was because of low hydrogen available for power. Don't know about the rest of the galaxy, but Centauri uses hydrogen for fuel. Without it, the station was shut down and everyone would die. Low hydrogen puts everyone in a bit of a spot, so they rioted. Then the Bureau decided fining would enforce order, and that backfired real bad. Long story short, Centauri robbed us some hydrogen capture equipment and got to work on their own. They're doing fine now, as far as I know. He took a small sip from the flask. They weren't justified in everything they did, but we were putting them in a tight spot. I don't blame them. I'm glad they won. If we'd won, we'd have another black spot on our history most likely.
Black spot?
Sleepy shook his head. You don't want to know, spaceman. Trust me on this one. With a sigh, Kirrel accepted this, and for several minutes they ate in silence. At last, Kirrel's frills pricked up as he heard Alex's voice approaching through a corridor. She seemed to be eagerly telling some sort of story, a bit too loud. Kirrel's frill spines slowly grew purple as he realized exactly which story she was telling. And then he marches right up and gets in his big ugly face and says, "You're not blaming me and mine for your mistakes, are you?" And then they ask about his gun, and he says he got it grave robbing, but the guy wasn't in it yet. It was the greatest thing I ever seen. Sleepy sighed and stood up. Didn't realize she was watching that mess. Hold on, spaceman. I'll go talk to her. He walked towards the corridor as Alex emerged. And then Carpenter says something about the kid, and the machine beats him up. That was not the best part, though. He went full on "don't talk to me or my son ever again" on him, and it was... Alex trailed off, staring at Sleepy with wide eyes.
Embarrassment?
Well, that made two of them. Sleepy stared at Alex for a moment, and then returned to the table without saying a word. Kirrel examined his face carefully.
Embarrassment?
Never mind. That made three of them. Maybe four if the Cuman Carpenter was still embarrassed as well.
What did she mean? The machine?
An old nickname. Before I was Sleepy, I was the machine. She's known me for a long time, so sometimes she still calls me that. It's a bit annoying, really. Kirrel paused.
And
His frills flushed a deep purple, and he had the feeling that he might be asking a forbidden question.
The part about "don't talk to me" or... I mean, is that a Cuman joke or something?
Sleepy hesitated. Well, sorta, I guess. I don't know. It's just a thing. A general protective action, I guess.
I see.
Kirrel paused for a moment, considering, then decided he might understand better with more time to process.
Why do you have that nickname? The machine?
Sleepy's hand, holding a laden eating utensil, paused on its way to his mouth. For several seconds he sat there, a look on his face that the translator explained as distress. Kirrel's frills began to slowly turn red. He hadn't meant to upset Sleepy. Look, spaceman, I don't want to talk about it. I just made some mistakes, did some bad things. Let's not worry about that now, huh? Tell me more about you. What's your species called?
Oh, we call ourselves HFY. I don't know what the rest of the galaxy calls us. We're mostly pretty insular, pack bonding and all.
HFY. I like it. Sleepy finally ate the bite that had been halfway to his mouth the whole time. During the meal, Kirrel found himself thinking again about Alex's statement. To his kind, that was a father's role. He shook himself mentally. That was silly and sentimental. Sleepy had said it was a species joke, and he had no reason to doubt it.
Rollaways don't get fathers.
He had to get his head on straight, as Happy had said. Even so, more than anything, Kirrel needed to think more clearly. His head was spinning. Spaceman? You okay? Kirrel had the strange sensation that his eyes were vibrating in his head.
I think so.
Abruptly it came to his attention that he was very much not okay. His core temperature was falling, and fast.
Getting cold. What's happening?
Something trickled out of his nose and began to fall on the table. It was a deep bluish, a shade the HFY could all see despite it not being a colour their frills turned. Blood. Spaceman? Kirrel felt the room tipping. Hey, spaceman! Hook! Help! He could hear the urgency in Sleepy's voice as his head hit the table. Thank you for listening to Those Days with the Monsters, episode 18. Read by me, a good bean.